welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. On today's episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast, I'm delighted to welcome Nasir Khan, MBE. Nasir is a principal at HKA, where he leads procurement advisory, claims, dispute avoidance management and resolution. That's a long list. He's an engineer, he's a chartered QS, he's chartered procurement and legally qualified. And on top of all of that, he's the co-founder and acts as executive director of Muslims in Rail, which is a social enterprise that aims to connect, grow and inspire Muslims working or seeking work in the rail industry. Nasir is quite honestly one of the most interesting people that I've ever had the privilege to meet, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, Nasir Khan, MBE. It's an absolute joy and a pleasure to welcome you onto the Intuitive Insights podcast.
Good morning, Nina. I'm really pleased to be here and having the opportunity to speak on your platform.
Thank you. And as we're recording this during the month of Ramadan, then can I also wish you Ramadan Kareem?
Ramadan Kareem to you too.
Thank you. So for the benefit of my podcast audience who may already know you or may have not come across you before, I'd like to introduce you properly. So Nasir Khan, MBE, co-founder of Muslims in Rail and principal at HKA, where you help clients in avoiding and resolving their disputes. The MBE for services to equality, diversity and inclusion, I believe.
Absolutely. And specifically in the rail sector, infrastructure as well. And it was a privilege. When I received the letter, I had to pinch myself. Okay. And it was just before COVID had begun. So I had to keep it a secret for almost 11 months.
Oh, my goodness.
Because the ceremony, which was supposed to be in June, was then cancelled in 2020. And you can imagine you're then not allowed to talk to anyone or disclose it. It was really a privilege.
Yes, yeah. And who presented the MBE to you?
Her Royal Highness Princess Anne.
How wonderful.
At Windsor Castle.
How wonderful.
And you would not believe how informative she is about the rail industry, about the issues of equality, diversity and inclusion. And I had almost 5 minutes chat with her.
Really? Wow.
First question was, how inclusive is the rail industry? And my response was, it's getting better and people have recognized it. I think I am a prime example of being here, that people understand how important it is. Her last question was, I'm not going to go through the whole story. Yeah. Her last question was, if there was one thing you would do to improve equality, diversity, and inclusion, what would you do? And it was very much an instinctive answer from myself, which was unconscious bias.
Okay.
And people need to be aware. I said, I have unconscious bias. Everyone has unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Whether it's affinity bias, whether it's reassurance bias, or whatever it is, you all have that. It's the recognition and self-awareness.
Yeah.
That is the one thing, because people have been recruiting in their own image. I said, I can start and recruit in my own image. That's not helping equality, diversity, and inclusion. That's the last thing you want to do. But being aware of your unconscious biases would help.
Yes. Yeah. I completely agree. And that's a huge subject, actually, which I'd love to explore with you at some point, but perhaps not today. Perhaps we'll come back to it in our discussion later. But in the tradition of the Intuitive Insights podcast, I would like to take you right back. So I've had the privilege of conversations with you over the last, 12 months or so, where you've shared your story with me, your personal story, which kind of becomes a career story, but it's so much more than that. And which was why I really wanted you to join me as my guest on the podcast, because I think it's such an interesting story and an inspiring one. So can I ask you to go back in time, Nasir, please, and share with us your story from kind of back in the day, what you chose to do as a career, how you got there, and all the way through to today in the role that you do with HKA.
Thank you for asking. I think being born in a family as the youngest child, my three siblings were very intellectual. They all went to universities. So there was a kind of passageway or pathway, right? You're going to do something as well. And we're kind of stamped. This is back in the 80s. You're going to be an engineer. You're going to be a doctor. Right. And my brother joined the Navy. He's older than me. So I was then the only one left at home from that perspective. So I started my career as an engineer and worked within the engineering sector. And that was my first, I would say, privilege and insight into equality, diversity, and inclusion. Really early on in my career, because I was working for an international organization. It was a Canadian organization founded by Alexander Graham Bell. And there were a lot of expats from Canada, from America, from England, who were working there. And it was interesting to get their perspective because they were the minority in that section. So that's why I said that I had a very early on interaction, how they perceived, behaved, or interacted with people. And it was a very, very interesting experience from a learning perspective. And being a very ambitious young person, I climbed up the ladder quite quickly within the organization. And from there, the idea came that, if I wanted to sustain or maintain those positions, I was asked that I needed to have a master's degree. And that was when I came to England and completed my master's. And once I completed my master's, I was very fortunate after applying for just over 1,200 jobs that I received, 3 interviews. I think I mentioned to you how interesting it was. And I still have that list of every single organization that I applied for at that time. And it was interesting to see why I was not being able to be selected for an interview. All I was trying to get was get me an interview and I'll, secure the position. And that's what happened. Finally received 3 interviews and joined Lang O'Rourke, a global construction business. And the reason of joining them was a very specific reason out of the 3 organizations. And it was very much because of their investment in younger talent, right? And how they helped develop people if they wanted to. And as you are aware, personal development comes from your own inspiration as well as from your employers. It's a partnership. Nobody can force you to develop, and you need help. If somebody says, I don't need anyone's help to develop, is, I think, a bit irresponsible to say. Yeah. So it was wonderful 7 years there, during which time I gained further qualifications, etc. And 2012, I joined Network Rail. I can say that I was involved in the rail sector before that as well. But once you join the let's say the proper railway family, so I joined Network Rail in 2012 and had amazing 7 years there. Learned so many different things, enjoyed my time, and left Network Rail to, again, for my personal development perspective as well, because I had worked for over 10 years with contractors. So I thought, okay, I've done 7 years with client. I need to now complete my triangle and go into a bit of more consultancy element.
Okay.
During all of this time, I did 3 masters and 2 undergrads, gained fellowships of 4 different institutions, became a mediator and arbitrator, and continued my personal professional development. At the same time, continued working for improving equality, diversity, inclusion, because that was something I recognized in the first week of my employment.
Okay. With Lang O'Rourke or with Network Rail?
Yes.
Yeah, with
Lang O'Rourke.
Yeah.
So going back to the beginning. So where I saw a different perspective and story when I was in Pakistan, working with expats, how reasonable adjustments had to be made for them to be able to do what they wanted to do. And it was quite interesting to see. And when I came here, it was a different perspective. Over in Pakistan, we would ask people what they wanted. I mean, it's part of the culture as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, because everybody from outside of the country would be treated as guests, and guests are, a blessing, regardless of where they come from. So it was very much reasonable adjustments, and those type of things came naturally to help, such colleagues accordingly. When I came to the UK, it wasn't that natural.
Okay.
So you had to inform what you need or what you want. I gave you an example earlier, and I would like to mention it here. For example, in Pakistan, Friday prayers, offices just close. You go to your Friday mosque for congregational prayer, and you come back. It takes about 30 minutes to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It was never a thing that you have to make special arrangements for that or things like that. And then when I was in my master's in university, Friday was the day off. So never felt that I had to miss a lecture or anything else. It just, was happening. So didn't feel it at that time. But when I started work, and in my first week, there was a meeting at 1 o'clock on a Friday.
Right.
And that was when I said, I'm not attending the meeting. I've got to go. And everybody just looked at me like I'm an alien. What am I talking about? This is a team meeting. The MD will be there. Bosses will be there. Everybody will be there. I said, I'm not attending. And it was like, people just couldn't understand what was going on through my head. I came, of course, from a different brought up and things like that. It came very natural to me. I'm not doing it, was my simple answer. And we interestingly spoke about it. And then I explained, look, do you see me going into that meeting room quite a few times? Because it was winter when I started, January.
Right.
So I was like, I said, because I do 5 times prayers. Oh, why do you do 5 times prayers? And it was because I was in my own bubble, even within the university environment as well. Didn't have as much conversations where I would have to explain why I'm going 5 times. And where I went there, I found some of these people haven't had the necessary interaction with other cultures, other faiths, or the acknowledgement of the needs, or maybe the people that they met were not practicing it in front of them, or they were just not aware. So this started into very interesting conversations. And this is where I think where I heard this for the first time in England, that football, religion, and politics should not be discovered in the workplace or discussed.
Yeah.
I found it absolutely appalling. How do I get to know you? What are your likes, dislikes? If we are a high performing, high functioning team, we need to know each other. We need to trust each other.
Yeah.
How do we get to know each other on a personal basis? If we have to trust each other, if you're working in a team of 7 or 8 and you don't know what their likes or dislikes are, how they are at a personal level as well, I think maybe it was difference in generation at the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I think there's almost an automatic assumption that those three areas, the football, the religion, and the politics, there's an automatic assumption in previous generations that we're not going to agree on this. So there's an expression, isn't there? Least said, soonest mended. So let's not talk about it. Let's pretend that those subject areas don't exist, and we'll all just carry on as we were without any risk of confrontation, rather than turning that on its head and saying there's all of this risk, if you like, of education and knowledge and speaking to interesting people about stuff that's different to my own experience. And that kind of just let's not talk about it, to where I would love us to get to, which is let's talk about it. Let's share.
Absolutely. I think this is where, I mean, back in those days, I started thinking about the difference of a debate and a dialogue.
Mm.
And I get it from where you're coming from. If you're having a debate, you will have a winner or a loser.
Yes.
Because that's where those, politics, religion, and sports, you may agree to disagree, but it's a debate. But this is where we need to have dialogue.
Yeah.
Because a dialogue is when you're making each other aware, you're improving each other's, follicles in the mind.
Yeah.
You're improving understanding, and that's why dialogue is important.
Mm.
And that's kind of where, very early on in my career, because we even in Pakistan, I mean, some people said, "Oh, which team do you support?" I was like, "Okay, I support, sorry to some listeners, I support Manchester United." And they were like, "Why do you support Manchester? You don't even live in Manchester." I said, "It's a global team."
Yeah.
How can you say? I mean, you can. So I asked them, "What's the team do you support?" "Oh, I support Liverpool." But you're not from Liverpool.
Yeah.
Why do you support them? Okay. So it's very interesting to have those dialogues, I think. And
yes,
even when we were in Pakistan, I know when the Premier League games were on, because of whatever time difference or Champions League games were on Monday, the first discussions at tea or coffee morning was always who won over the weekend.
Right.
So we were very used to it. I mean, Premier League is watched globally. I mean, if we just talk about football,
of course, yeah.
So anybody coming from anywhere else to the UK, if they're a fan of sports, they would know what's happening and things like that. And I find it sometimes sports, regardless of whatever it is an icebreaker sometimes.
Mm.
Or politics is an icebreaker sometimes, or religion is an icebreaker sometimes, because at least these three elements, if you're not a fan of sports, you may be a fan of politics, or you may be a fan of religion, or not a fan of religion. Could be either case, either way. But at least it is an icebreaker, because it just starts and gets us talking. And when we get to know each other, I think this is something I do a lot in my claims work as well. Rapport building is the most important thing.
Yeah.
80% of the battle is won when you build a good rapport.
Yeah. And that's that word again, I think, for me, that you've just mentioned, that's so important. It's that dialogue. It's that being able to have a conversation, and it's whether that's between two people or a larger group, that is a positive conversation where we're not looking for a winner and we're not looking for a loser. We're looking for the best outcome for everybody, whether that's in the kind of the dispute resolution world that you work in, or whether that's just in a normal conversation that may take part between two people who've met for the first time and have got some differences as well as some commonalities. And the commonality being, we're all human beings. We've all got a story, and we've all got something reasonably interesting to share, and some more so than others, I guess. But
absolutely.
So seven years at Lango Rourke, 7 years at Network Rail before then moving into the consultancy field. So I'm interested to kind of understand from Network Rail then what came next. And over that period, what difference have you noticed, if any, in relation to that initial kind of, well, nobody's treating me as a guest, nobody's asking what reasonable adjustments I need. Have you noticed any difference? So continue your story.
Absolutely, a huge difference. I mean, back in even at Lango Rourke, back in 2009, a couple of years in, they were making a state-of-the-art facility in Steepley, and I received a phone call as part of the team there that, oh, we're putting in a multi-faith room in the factory.
Right.
I mean, that was, a success there.
Yeah.
And when I joined Network Rail, I still remember Mark was one of the directors who was showing me around the quadrant, the head office, and he was so excited to just showcase. Oh, and you would love this room. We have a multi-faith room. As soon as we walked into the room, he was himself a little bit, oh, is that it? Because it was a 6 foot, I think, a 2 meter by 3 meter room, potentially a very, very small box room. And that was a start of making a lot of changes at Network Rail to improve awareness within facilities. And that was my role. I was looking after building, civil, and property. Yeah. So facilities was under the remit. So I had a lot of discussions with the facilities people, right? What's our makeup of different employees within different offices? What are their needs? And Network Rail was launching its networks at the time to improve equality, diversity, and inclusion. That's part of its Everyone strategy, which was launched by Lorraine Martins. And it made an enormous amount of difference in the organization, not just in Network Rail, across the rail industry, I would say, from people awareness perspective. And this is kind of where the thought of Muslims in rail started to come in. Right. Because I thought with my co-founders, Hassan Ahmed, who works at Arcades, and Abdul Wadud, who's now gone into the education sector, leaving Network Rail, we thought, is our influence limited if we are just looking after Network Rail? Yeah. How do we make our influence bigger? And that was the foundation of Muslims in Rail. And it started with very much, if you don't know, you don't know. So how do we speak to people, make them aware of these different needs and requirements? So for example, a lot of people have chosen not to work in the city or in such sectors because of their obligatory prayers requirements, fasting, and everything else. Yeah. They've decided to go into different sectors. So one of the things we thought we would go and ask people, why are you not working in the rail industry? They simply weren't aware of what is the rail industry. I can't drive a train for 4 hours. Hey, we're not just train drivers. Exactly. I mean, I would love to be one, but we're not there. I don't think anybody would trust a train to me anyway. So it's about those awareness, and we were all very enthusiastic about STEM, science, technical, engineering subject. Having an engineering background, it was kind of very natural for me to, interact in such environment, especially then later on, as you know, I moved into more commercial contracts and claims type roles, where you kind of embed all of this together. And it became apparent that all of the volunteering was happening in very similar spaces. Right. Okay. And I was thinking more of, okay, why are we not going to a council state school? So at that time, I moved to Milton Keynes, where Network Rail head office was. And I knew certain areas where we would like to have gone to. And STEM it just happened that such volunteering was just not happening in those areas of those schools and places.
Right.
So
Okay.
we started to just go into those voluntarily and started having those discussions and things. And I think I mentioned to you from my son's perspective. One day he came back from school and told me, I want to be a policeman.
Yeah.
And this is back in 2015. And it intrigued, why do you want to be a policeman? And then he was so excited. He said, we had a sergeant at school. He told us all how he keeps the community safe, how we can sleep at night, how they keep crimes at bay, how they, make sure everybody is safe. I want to be that.
Yeah.
And it was that excitement. And we came back and just discussed it amongst ourselves. How many of us actually go in as role models and explain the rail industry or infrastructure or construction enthusiastically?
Yeah. And
not many of us do.
Absolutely won't hear any argument from me on this. I'm consistently banging a drum around we need to have much more engagement, and actually much earlier as well.
Yes.
Yes, we represented, the rail industry is represented at careers fairs, but that's too late. We need to be engaging and infusing at the much younger age and talking about the impact that the railway has on everybody's lives, whether or not you're actually a passenger. You will still be receiving goods that have travelled by train from the port to the distribution depot. It touches everybody's lives, but we don't talk about this, and there's far too little engagement at the early years stage. Although there is great work happening, I'd just like to see more of it.
Absolutely. And we then kind of targeted the primary schools.
Right.
Because that's where you need to enthuse people with their math subjects. Because if they are weak in primary school, secondary, they wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
And when, the time for GCSE and your electives and those type of things come in, they'll try and avoid it at all costs, because the foundation, that's why it's called foundation years, primary school, because and again, I'm sorry, I'm a civil engineer, so I have to give a foundation example. You have to have a strong foundation before you can start building it up.
Yeah.
And I think the creative element of arts, humanities subject, is as important as science. You need to have a balance in your foundations. And that's what most primary schools do. But again, this is something we need to enthuse people into doing. And one of the things, when Muslims in Rail at that time was being launched and started, we were looking at our community's main issues as a whole.
Right.
There were so many researches out there of the lack of inclusion, the lack of understanding, equality, diversity, inclusion issues at policy levels.
Yeah.
Because what people said is, oh, we have an equal opportunity policy. I'm like, absolutely brilliant. So what are you achieving with that? We are achieving equal opportunity. We're very inclusive. We are anti-racist. Okay, that's interesting. So we then started investigating a couple of things, and I want to really give you some examples on that.
Please.
One of the key examples is for apprentices applications or things like that. I've come across checklist. Oh, have you done any volunteering? Okay. Tick. Great. You go to the next step. No tick. You're off. And I started to look at it and give my own example. I started work when I was 14.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was because, you have your desires and your wants as a kid, and your parents have limitation in their income and things like that. I come from social mobility, and I proudly say that. So I started working at 14. So if I wanted, those specific trainers, I can go on and buy those.
Yeah.
Or if I wanted to go and watch a cricket match at a stadium, I can go on and afford that. And that was my reason of started, at an early age. And I compare it to people around here in the UK as well, who come from social mobility. Volunteering is the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
Because you've got to put food on the table and you've got to make ends meet. So what you're doing with such inferences is making a further divide.
Yeah.
Then it is not an equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And this is where I love equal opportunity, but sometimes equal opportunity doesn't work. And we need to pick and choose.
I think one of the challenges there as well is that having an equal opportunities policy, as in we've got a document that is stored on the, company intranet or whatever, so we've done it then. So well, no, actually. So for me, it's exploring the behaviours that sit underneath that, and the equal opportunities policy is the least you should be doing. So that has to be there. That's a requirement that's there. But what I'd love to know, Nasir, from your perspective, is some of the good things that you've seen over the last few years in relation to that inclusive leadership and inclusivity generally. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are changing in the rail industry for the better? There's a long way to go, but what changes have you seen?
I'll give not just the rail industry, a generic example. I think we've 9 protected characteristics. We focused significantly on gender equality.
Yeah.
We focused significantly on gender pay gap. And Network Rail, for example, is a prime example who's now looking beyond that and looking at not just gender pay gap, looking at ethnicity pay gap. I think they are one of the prime ones to be able to notice it. I'll give you a simple example. 1997, gender pay gap was 27%. 2022, it's 12%.
Yeah.
That's a massive, massive change.
Huge.
However, it's very different for younger women and older women. Okay. From an age demographics perspective, younger women still have a massive gender pay gap.
Right.
Okay. And this is again statistics available on the official ONS website. However, 2022 statistics on ethnicity pay gap is 27.5%.
Right.
So the problem is we have focused on an area, brilliant, but when it's a protected characteristic and we talk about equal opportunity, I think we need to discuss all of these things equally.
Yeah.
What I feel that the industry is doing is absolutely fantastic on gender, sexual orientation, and now we need to look at ethnicity equality as well. I discuss with a number of senior leaders and they say, oh, we are very diverse in our organization. I'm like, absolutely brilliant. You are diverse in your organization. Can you tell me how diverse is your boardroom? How diverse is your senior management?
Yeah.
Okay. How diverse is your directors? How diverse is, your supervisory element? If you have got all of the, where you are saying, your ethnic minorities and things at the base level, at the base grades, we have a problem.
Yeah.
And these are some of the discussions that I've had recently with quite a number of people who are actually asking, right, so what do we need to do?
Yeah.
How do we improve it? And again, it's a journey. The first step is having recognition that I have a problem.
Yeah.
Because my boardroom, which is making all these decisions, is not representative of a number of people who are, at the base level of an organization.
Yeah.
And having that recognition is the first step. But then second thing I always say is, what are we enthusing them with? How are we supporting their development? Do they have, mentors who can guide and support, right? This is what you need to do for your career progression. I meet a number of people who, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've had several conversations with a number of people who've kind of given up in terms of not applying for promotion. I'm just going to stay here. I've tried it 5 or 6 times. I never get promoted into a different position. I think I'll just retire into this post now. And we've kind of sucked the energy or enthusiasm out of such people.
Yeah.
And I see more and more of that.
Do you see, just to kind of go back to the recognition element, from your perspective over the last, I don't know, shall we choose 5 years?
Yes.
Has that increased? Has that recognition increased? Or is there, have we got still far too many kind of, well, there's no problem here because, you know, we've got an equal opportunities policy, so therefore everything's great? Or are you finding that more people are engaging with you to ask you these questions that I'm saying to you now? It's kind of what do we need to do? If I could say to you, there were 3 things that we need to do as an industry, which would help not solve the issue, but would help move us along that journey at a quicker pace. Because yes, the gender piece has definitely improved, but that's taken a very long time. It's not happened overnight. We don't want to wait that long, do we, for the other areas that we need to get better at in terms of underrepresented communities? What would be 3 things that, as a leader of an organisation in the transport industry or actually anywhere, what would be the 3 things that you would advise leaders to be doing?
Number 1 is having recognition of the makeup of the communities we serve.
Yeah.
Having almost close to equal representation in our organization at all levels has to be the priority.
Yeah.
Second thing, we need to look at all protected characteristics, not just, pick and choose to tick in the box, because if you're thinking of it as a tick in the box, we already have massive skills shortage in this country. The immigration policies, as you know, are challenging. So it's very, very difficult to fulfill and secure a significant number of key and important roles for major organizations. The third thing is very much is the first thing that I mentioned about to you, having that unconscious bias removed from the system. The system may have these hidden things that we are unaware of. Having to record a 1-minute video interview to be able to send someone, I don't know what is being observed in that 1-minute video interview, because in that 1 minute, what are you looking at? If you are looking at, we've got somebody who thinks out of the box, is very confident, is very much, thought-provoking, brilliant, tick in the box. But what if somebody was on the autism spectrum disorder and they are shy to look at the camera, and they are looking down while talking, and they are a bit hesitant, but they are absolutely brilliant data analytic or mathematician or scientist or whatever they are, or a legal profession who knows case law the back of their head from everything from the 18th century to date. This is where I think, and this is where you come in and help. I think to make that massive change in terms of how recruitments are done. How you can make that impression into people that, look, you are saying you are aware of this, or what are you doing about it? I always give the football coach example. I have 3 kids on autism spectrum in my football team. I am a football coach. And if I just give verbal instruction, I've done equal opportunity. I know those 3 don't understand verbal instruction. So I have to go and tell them one by one. And then those 3, for some reason, perform better than the 9. But if I was just giving verbal instruction, it just wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work.
And that's the recognition needed.
Exactly. So it's that word again, isn't it? It's the recognition that we have. There are so many different people that can contribute to the success, the performance of an organisation, of a community, of a society. and to reach a point where we can actually recognize those differences and celebrate those differences and feel like we are richer because of them. And I can't say all of that without saying, again, a huge thank you to Muslims in Rail for the Discover Ramadan course. We went along to the Krishna Mosque in Cheetham Hill in Manchester last Monday.
Yeah.
The feeling of community at that event was amazing. The learning that I got, the education that I got in a very welcoming, very warm environment was significant. So there was an investment of, I don't know, a couple of hours from my perspective to go and be welcomed and to be educated and to be inspired was phenomenal. So those kind of things, those kind of events where we're being encouraged to learn about difference, celebrate difference, and then, kind of actually find out that we're not that different after all. There's just a few things that we may do in our day, our week, our month that is not the same. I could honestly talk to you for hours on this subject, and we have talked for hours in the past, and I'm sure we'll go on to do so again. But in terms of, we need to bring this conversation to a close. In terms of anything you'd like to leave with our audience in relation to one small step that we might be able to do to be better allies, to be to help, to inspire, to connect, to grow, what would you like to see, Nasir?
I think there is a Thomas Jefferson statement about this. I don't remember it exactly, but I think what he said is very much to do something is the best thing. Okay. Yeah. And to just think about is okay, but to do nothing is the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah.
So at least think about it if you can't do anything, but please do something about it. And that is what I would like all of our leaders, all of our organizations, all of our recruiting teams, and even people on all sides of different protected characteristics to understand. There is no bias approaching into anything. It's about understanding those biases and then removing them from our perspective, whether they are conscious or unconscious. We may have both. We all do. It's about understanding those and then doing something about it.
Yeah. Thank you. I think from this conversation we've had this morning, what my mind keeps going back to is your comment around being treated as a guest. So having someone in your organization, how can I make you feel more comfortable? How can I make this a more positive experience for you? And that does require some thought, and it does require us to do something different. That recognition in the first place is key. Yeah. Nasir Khan, MBE, my huge, huge thanks to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as I always do. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nina. I'm really glad and pleased to be able to, share some of my experiences. Thank you for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Thank you. My huge thanks to Nasir for joining me on this episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast. Please do subscribe to our series of podcasts if you're interested in listening to fascinating conversations from leaders in the transport industry. I'd love you to join us for the next episode coming soon.